Welcome to another edition Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. Dr. Steve Wood. Joining me today, Dr. Bill Kanasky. Bill, how are you?
Rocking and rolling, baby. Rocking and roll. I gotta tell you, froze my ass off this morning. It was chill, a little chilly this morning in Orlando. Now I'm not gonna say what the temperature was because the people in Chicago, New York, and Minnesota and Wisconsin are all gonna laugh. But I'm just saying, I had to put the heat on. Had to put the heat on.
I'm cold right now in my office.
I know. I have a hoodie right here.
So
Unbelievable.
Bill, I brought you on today because, as we do a lot of witness work, probably 50% of our work is working with witnesses. We podcast and blog and talk about witnesses.
50%. Yep.
So I brought you on today because I wanted to go through and talk about really 5 different kind of witness types that we see, at least problematic witness types that we see as we're preparing witnesses, dive into those a little bit and talk about how you should be identifying these issues and then, how you can help alleviate some of them or fix some of these problems.
Big headaches.
Big headaches. So I'm just going to dive right into it unless you have a rant built up that you're, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, actually, I tell you what, I don't have a rant. I have an honor I need to share that you're well aware of. So for the year of 2024, CLM magazine came out with their top 10 most read articles of the year. And I'm happy to say a combination of you and I accounted for how many? 4 of the 6. And we had 3 in the top 5 and then another one at number 6. So we had 1, 4, 5, and 6. Our articles were rated. So first of all, we want to say thank you to CLM Magazine. I find them to be a great publication. Working with them has been fantastic. All of the graphic design stuff they put, they are second. I mean, should I just bash DRI right now or not? Should I say that?
We'll hold off on that.
We'll hold off on DRI, but CLM Magazine, they have great readership, a wide audience, very professional to work with. So we like working with them, as well as Law 360. We're still waiting for our stats to come back from them on how our articles did last year. But to get slots number 1, 4, 5, and 6. Listen, thank you for all your help. Very proud of Courtroom Sciences. We put a lot of work, and these articles, I gotta tell you right now, these articles are badass. 2 of those articles were the reptile edge, the evolution. Those were 1 and 5, respectively. We had the our anger paper, which we'll be coming out with part 2 of. That was number 4. I think personally that was the most important one.
Yeah,
I really wish it would have been. I think that should have been number 1. I wish it would have been, but I'll take top 5. And then you had your article with Floyd Cantrell and I forget who's the other author.
Marshall.
I'm sorry, Jeff Marshall. They're at number 6, and so we felt that CLM has a wide audience, and we put a lot of work into these papers. All of our papers are scientifically based, and again, we really strive to give accurate answers to a lot of these questions, because the reason why you and I write so many of these papers is, quite frankly, the papers we read and kind of like, oh boy, there's a lot of assumptions being made on what's going on, whether it be nuclear verdicts or reptile theory or anger jurors, or the new one we've heard all the last 30 days, Gen Z. They're the worst jurors. They're responsible for all these bad verdicts. We know what's going on, and everything that we do is data driven, and so we're trying to give the real answers to our audience, and we're happy to do it. But to get 4 of the top 10 spots, I thought was extraordinary, and I don't think we're getting a plaque or a trophy or anything, but it's a great honor, and I'm very glad that the readers obviously enjoy the article. So great work on your end too.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of time trying to find time to fit it in, but it's what we do, right? It's what
Yeah.
we have to do it to make sure we get out the data.
I'd like a podcast award is what I'd like to. There's my rant. Yeah, there's a pod. I get an award for a podcast, like a podcast honorable mention or something. Not getting any of that. Don't know what's up with that. But I tell you what, we hear from listeners every week, sometimes every day. So we have a really good audience here. But yeah, maybe we're not going to win any awards for the podcast. But I really don't need awards for the podcast. It'd be nice. It'd be nice. But I know we're doing a good job because so many people are listening. So many people talk about it. So
That's right. Awards, we can set the awards aside. So let's dive right into it then. Speaking of
let's
our
dive in.
audience, first one, Bill, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Is the overly agreeable witness? This is the one who says yes, yes, yes to everything. I'll say anything. Get me out of this deposition chair. I don't care what I have to admit to. I just will agree to it. And then when you ask them later, why did you say yes to that? They have no clue.
Yeah. So this happens. This happens for two reasons, and we call this the yes train. The yes train. They hop on the yes train and they go to Yesville, and there's no stops. Once you're on the train to Yesville, there's only one destination, and that's Yesville. You can't get off of that. It's a very, very bad habit. So witnesses do this for two reasons. One of the reasons, which is pretty innocent, they're just really nice, gullible people, and they just, again, they kind of have this. They trust the questioner way too much, and this is typically coming from a questioner that's nice to them, right? A questioner that's nice, they're professional, affable, and then the witness gets way too comfortable and just starts agreeing with everything, right? So that's kind of one way that manifests itself. The other way, but the more dangerous way, remember we have three survival responses. We have fight, flight, and freeze. And when a witness gets scared, okay, you've heard I wrote a paper on this, right? Deer in the headlights. They get deer in the headlights, and then they get on the yes, 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 more of a survival response just to survive the deposition. So the first type of witness is this kind of being too nice and too comfortable and agreeing. The other one's pretty much scared shitless, and they're in deer in the headlights mode, and they're on the yes train. But both of those witnesses, they're going to agree with way too much. They're going to agree with damaging things. And then, once that's on the record, it's really difficult. And you and I have tried to work with these witnesses before trial. You got a transcript full of yeses, you're in big trouble.
Yeah. I think it goes back to, you were saying that they're just kind of gullible or nice people. I mean, I think it goes back to the point that some of them just don't like conflict, right? Some of them don't want
Yeah.
to say something that's going to cause the other opposing counsel to get upset with them, to question them, to say, really, that's going to be your testimony to the jury. And then they instantly kind of flip and then feel bad about it because they don't like the confrontation, don't want to push back on something that they know the answer is not yes.
Yeah, so this is really important. So when that process happens, remember there's three survival responses. So the fight response, the witness will start arguing and become very defensive. The flight response, they'll try to pacify the situation with explanations, right? They'll try to pacify, so they still talk, but they're doing so in more of a, okay, calm down, let me explain, to try to get themselves out of trouble. The freeze response is when they go, okay, fine, you're right. Okay, I get it. Yep, leave me alone. Answer's yes. Next question. So there's three ways that the survivor responses, come out there, and all three are going to be bad.
And I think that's one of the things too I want to talk about is all of these things. When we talk about, too many people think when you're prepping them for depositions that they always always think about the fight response, right? It's always,
Yeah.
well, they're not going to be able to get under my skin, they're not going to be able to get me upset, they're not going to be able to get me to lose my cool. But that mistake that you would make there arguing is really no different than the freeze or the
Yeah.
flight, where you're just going to start making excuses. So and when everybody thinks about this, they always go to the argumentative and forget about these other aspects.
Yeah, so by definition, let's get a little bit of neuroscience, right? Why not? Prove we know what you're talking about. So fight or flight is essentially that amygdala hijack response. That's what we always talk about. Amygdala and hippocampus combine, and it leads to those two things. Now here's what gets weird. The freeze response is the hyperactivity of the parasympathetic nervous system. So remember, so sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Parasympathetic nervous system, that's actually where you want the witness. That's the more relaxed stage, right? Chill out stage. That's where you want the witness. But the parasympathetic nervous system, if that gets hyperactivated, that's where the freeze comes in, and they'll be just like, yes, 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 deer in the headlights. All of it very dangerous. And so, working with these witnesses, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, educate your witness. These are common mistakes, and here's what happens, right? Your emotions get the best of you, or you go into this freeze. Explain that to them, and then when it starts happening, make sure you tell them, what's going on, why it's happening, and they need to be aware of these, cognitive errors that they'll make, because once they go there, it's really difficult to get them out.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I like to do too is talk with witnesses ahead of time when we're talking about these emotional mistakes, is get a sense for where that witness is and where that witness falls, in having them be honest with you. Because I'll always say is, I don't think this is going to come as a shock to you, is I'm more of the fight response, right? I'm going to be more of the hothead, lose my
Yeah,
cool versus that.
yeah,
So, I'll self admit that that's where I fall, and then get the witness to kind of do reflection on themselves about where they fall, because I think there's value in
yeah.
identifying the white type of witness they are, having you tell them or having them tell you, and then you can help them work through it too. So then you're identifying why
Totally.
those mistakes are bad, and then helping them come over and overcome it.
Now, if you're a trial attorney, you do not ask your witnesses these questions.
No.
You don't, and you actually really need to. Now, if we do it for you, because we've been, retained on your case, we're going to get to the heart of this a lot faster than you do. But, we'll let you play a little armchair psychologist. You should be asking those questions, because that's going to tell you a lot about your witness. And if you set those questions up right and you ask them, they'll kind of tell you how they respond, to conflict. And you'll get, if somebody's going to be more vulnerable to one of those three survival responses.
Yep. All right, let's move on to, when we're talking about the fight or the flight responses. Now we're going to move on to those. We got the defensive, the defensive witness, the one who, wants to say, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, wants to explain away everything, wants to say they didn't do anything wrong, tries to convince you that they're a good company, tries to convince you that, you know, everything they did was rational and appropriate, and they just can't admit to things that they need to admit to because they want to jam in the explanation because they feel like they have to.
Yeah, so you get a lot of amygdala hijack there. These witnesses, yeah, they want to fight, they want to argue, they want to defend. And here's the problem. Most of these witnesses don't know any better because they don't know the game, right? They think they're playing checkers, but the game is actually chess. And they're being baited into these responses largely, right? So the brain, let's go back. It's all goes back to neuropsychology, Steve. The brain is wired to defend. It's pre-wired to defend. I mean, I'm sitting in my home office right now, right? If one of my family members comes in here and starts blaming me for something, I'm gonna defend myself. That's what I do. And this happens in you're at work, right? You're at work and a coworker blames you for something. You're like, screw you. No, I didn't. And here's why, right? I mean, you give it right back to them. That's how we tend to handle things. So, unfortunately, a lot of witnesses get into defensive mode. Now, here's the problem that we see. I'll be careful here, Steve. Some witnesses are instructed to do so, right? So if you tell your witnesses, like, hey, you're like De Niro on Goodfellas, you don't think no shit off nobody, right? If you tell your witness that, they're going to fly off the handle.
Yeah.
And then again, you get subcortical information processing going on, and you're going to get those survival fight responses. And nobody comes across well when they're angry, when they're defensive, when they're argumentative. It's a very, very bad look. And you know as well as I do I mean, listen, how many times have we tested either witness videos from depositions or sometimes even live witnesses where we saw this happen? I mean, have you ever had jurors? You ever poll the jury afterwards of a defensive witness and all the jurors were like, oh yeah, we loved him. No,
No.
it's the opposite, right? Hurts their credibility.
Yeah, and that's what's always frustrating, as you said, and we'll be a little bit careful on this about when people are told to
Yeah.
fight. I mean, I think that there's always a concern too, is they want their witnesses to push forward a narrative. They want their witnesses to have a backbone. They don't want them to get pushed around, in the deposition. So sometimes the attorneys want their witnesses to do it, but like I said, the witnesses themselves want to do it because they don't want to be pushed around. I mean, I can think of an owner of a company who, when you're being accused of something, it's like
Yeah.
calling your child ugly and you feel like you need to defend it, and then you're telling the witness, yeah, that's exactly the opposite of what you want to do. The problem is they can never get out of their own way, because while they hear and understand what you're trying to say, they just can't, because they feel like, if I don't, then I'm letting all my people down. I'm looking like I don't protect my company.
They take it personally.
Yeah.
That's the key. Is they're playing checkers, not chess. And so what we train them to do is, first of all, we identify what those questions look like and sound like. All right. And you and I can be pretty rough with the with the witness, and we force these, questions upon them to desensitize them to that process, because that's what we're really doing. You have to desensitize the brain so that their survival mechanisms don't take over, and they can keep using prefrontal cortex and use the logical part of their higher level, higher processing brain. Well, when you start attacking somebody verbally, that subcortical brain wants to jump in and take over and defend. So you got to train the witness, got to rewire their brain to be desensitized to such attacks and understand we're playing chess, we're not playing checkers. So when those things happen and the witness stays calm and they confidently say, "No, I disagree," period. You've just that's the torpedo. That's the weaponry for them to use, which is highly, highly effective. But they don't understand that at first. They think, well, if I'm being attacked, if I don't defend, then I look bad or I look weak. No, it's the opposite. You look bad and weak when you start running your mouth and you become defensive. If you reject, we call the phrase that you and I use in our training is reject and elevate, meaning reject the question, right, which is typically some sort of blame or criticism, and then elevate your tone of confidence, meaning you can disagree with a questioner in a very confident, professional way, and that's going to come across really, really well. Any type of defensiveness will hurt your credibility and trustworthiness. And here's the real problem. It's the neurochemical reaction. Once you go into survival mode, right? So now what happens is you start fighting on every question. Even factual, right? Factual questions, you'll start arguing. Yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. And before you know it, the entire deposition is this one big argument, right? And then you've seen this. Jurors do not like this at trial. You get into the yeah buts and no becauses. Jurors unilaterally just flat out reject that and just say, "Come on, like, what are you doing?" And we've had several mock jurors be highly critical of witnesses that we've showed them exactly for this reason.
Yeah, and I want you to talk a little bit about, before we get any further into the other personality types that we work with. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the amount of time that it takes to get these witnesses? I mean, I think sometimes there's always this, we're getting called depots in like 48 hours, and B, you're getting I have this witness, but you only have this set amount of time. Anything more than that's going to be difficult. Can you talk a little bit about the time that it takes, the expectations, and how
Yeah.
these things are not quick fixes?
Yeah. I think the sweet spot for training uh, and doing this for over 20 years is, I would say the range is the 9 to 12 hour range. So what you're looking at, typically at a minimum, a day and a half, right? And then likely 2 days, particularly for trial. Like if it's trial prep, it's 2 days is the absolute minimum. But let's assume it's deposition, right? It's a lot of information. It's a lot of brain rewiring. And then on top of that, you have to pile on the strategy. This is not a fast process, number one. Number two, when you're rewiring brains, you're rewiring habits and information processing circuits that have been highly reinforced for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years. So change, it's like telling you, it's like, oh, you write with your right hand. Well, now we're going to write with your left hand, right? Yeah, well, that's not going to That's not going to work out very well the first the first couple times, right? But your brain will adjust eventually. And so what we're doing here, so we get a very short window. Um, that's certainly a disadvantage. It's a time-intensive process. It's an advanced process, and some of these witnesses we've seen, particularly the ones with, say, they're on a hair trigger emotionally, you could even add more time to that because now you're adding a whole nother level of complexity to the system.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point to bring up because I think there's an expectation that if you have 3 hours, you can meet with a witness and get this done in 3 hours, and then have them be
Now,
successful in a deposition.
now the only time I've seen that work, and I mean, I'm gonna be honest here, it has worked, is there's been a couple times where I've been called by a client and they've said, listen, we have a witness, say it's a safety director at a transportation company. They've been deposed 20 times. Deposed 20 times. They know the process. This case is similar to some of these other cases. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here, and this person's already good. We want to take them to a higher level. We want to take them from good to great. Well, there you can expedite some of that training because you don't have, listen, how many witnesses do you and I work with where it's their first deposition? A
A lot.
lot. And they're scared. They're coming in hot, right? Or they're coming in either hot or really nervous, right? But then you may have somebody that, hey, they've been down this road before many of times, and you can kind of skip chapters 1 through 4 and start with chapter 5. It is going to shave down some of that prep time. I think that's rarely the case. Wouldn't you say the same?
Yeah, I think, yeah, more often than not, we need to spend a lot of time with them, but very, very, and we're going to talk a little bit about even those individuals who've been deposed multiple times can also pose a problem and have some things that need to be worked on too. But yeah, I think the biggest take home is that all of this is a time intensive process, and to think that you're going to do it in a few hours and overhaul your witnesses is, is a pipe dream. But we'll move
Yes.
on to our next topic. We'll move on to our next type, witness type. This is the angry witness. This is the one who, kind of much like the defensive one where they want to yeah, but the angry witness is upset how this has infected them. It's upset with the fact that the case hasn't settled yet. It's upset with the game that they call
They're
it.
mad at everybody.
Yeah.
They're not only mad at the plaintiff's attorney and the claim, they're mad at their attorney.
Yep.
They're mad at the insurance company that the case hasn't settled yet. So here's what, if you just want the quickest example of this, everybody just open up a fresh Google page and just type in my pillow guy deposition. Case closed.
Yeah. That is the
Case
epitome.
closed. And we can't even repeat what he said in his deposition on this podcast because, again, we'll get banned. We'll get banned. We'll get an R rating for that. But I mean, that's obviously an extraordinarily extreme example of that. But we do see it all the time, and they're angry, and they're angry with everybody, right? So you get your defensive people, and again, you could have some overlap here. Defensive and angry people, right? You could have
Yeah.
some overlap here, and kind of an interaction effect. But lots of times, these defensive people, they're not angry. They're trying to defend themselves, their company, their reputation. That's one thing. But the angry witness that comes in, they're angry that they have to do that. They're angry during the prep session, Steve. They're angry like I have to leave my job and all my important, and then I have to spend it with you idiots, right? I mean, they're real. They just don't like anybody, and they're angry at all aspects. I think these are some of the more difficult witnesses to work with because they're not like they don't return phone calls. They don't want to show up for meetings. They cancel witness prep meetings, and then when they get there, they're like double middle fingers, and they just so that getting around that. And here's the funny thing is a lot of times, we have like the what I would call the former employee witness that comes in angry, right? And that's kind of like a subset of this, but it can happen with anybody that has to go through a lawsuit or trial testimony. And if it doesn't get fixed, can certainly blow up in your face.
Yeah, I think for me, this one tends to be one of the probably the most difficult type of witness to work with because a lot of time is spent on the front end, just letting them vent, get out all their frustration. But then there's also this time that you need to help build rapport with them. Because like you said, getting the double middle finger when we, as soon as we walk in, they don't want to listen to you as you're trying to go through the information. And then slowly but surely you have to start peeling back the layers of the onion. That takes time.
Yeah.
Once again, this is not a quick fix. That I always spend a lot of time with them on the front end, just calming them, calming their nerves, getting them, less angry. And it might be that we don't even get into the training until an hour, hour and a half into it. But too often everybody wants to just dive right in and just blow past the
Yep.
fact that they're angry rather than spending the time to get to the root of what they're angry about and get overcoming that first. Because if you don't get buy-in, it doesn't matter what you say after that, right? It doesn't matter what we're going to try to tell them.
Well, then they get angrier, right? So you got to get to the heart of the matter before, because here's the other thing, which is well known in the neuropsychology literature. Angry people don't encode information very well, right? In fact, any type of emotion, if you're at a high level of emotion, regardless of what it, now here's the tricky part, right? Everybody assumes anger. You could be, oh, think about it, right? When you're when you're angry, you say dumb things, you do dumb things. But here's the thing, when you're too happy,
Yep.
you impulse shop, right? Or you spend too much. Yeah, talk to my family about that. So emotion in either direction can really screw up cognition. And one of the ways it definitely screws up cognition, I don't know if you remember, I remember back in when I was an undergrad at UNC, we had I never. And now speaking of trauma, I'm gonna bring up some trauma here. 1998, number one seed, and we lost to the four seed in the final four, which was Utah and Rick Majerus. I was so pissed. I threw a temper tantrum at the sports bar I was in. I'm like kicking over stuff, throwing things, just full temper tantrum. And like I have an exam in 2 days. Like I was useless. I don't think I did very well in the exam because I was trying to study, and all I have is intrusive thoughts about missed free throws and missed 3 pointers. Our top 3 point shooter goes, 2 for 13 from the field. And I'm going, like I couldn't get out of my head, and so I can't process information the way I needed to and learn. And that's a lot of what witness training is learning the strategy, learning the case themes, learning how you're going to be attacked with various exhibits. Yes, if you have a witness that's angry, complete total waste of time. And so that's why we tell attorneys that we work with, like, listen, the first half a day, we may not even be talking about this case,
Which stresses them out,
right? I
right?
mean, it stresses like I've got to do some therapeutic things here to get this person in the right mind space to go on with the actual prep. And then the attorney's sitting there tapping his foot or rolling his eyes, and I'm like, dude, like I can't. We cannot work with an angry witness. It's a waste of time. But same thing, a depressed witness, an anxious witness, right? It doesn't matter. A happy witness comes in like, hey, this is going to be no big deal. It's like, we need to talk. Yes, it is. Anything emotional is going to impair the ability, the witness's ability to learn. So that has to be one of the first steps that you handle.
And I'm glad you brought up the happiness too, because I think when we talk about emotion, we always think of anger and you don't think
Yeah.
clearly. But happy witnesses, like you said, the one, this is going to be fine, this is going to be great, this isn't going to be a big problem. And then once we start getting into the topics, and they have a uh-oh moment and then realize it's not as going to be as easy as they thought, and then that causes problems. So I'm glad you brought that up. All right, moving on, we're going to talk about the apathetic witness. This is right, the one who not even necessarily apathetic to the process, but just kind of apathetic in general. When they present in their deposition, they come across apathetic, no emotion. You might have a traumatic case, and as they come across as flat, cold, indifferent, which jurors don't like, right?
Yeah, they don't like it. And I don't think this is, we don't see a lot of this. We don't see a lot of it, but it does happen. And they need to be invested into the process. A lot of it's just avoidance. They want nothing to do with it. And they're kind of, so some people have that anger response. Some people have the, apathy response. That's never going to work. But, and think about, if it was trial testimony, right? Like think of like, direct examination. Well, if the witness isn't confident, right, and showing some at least a little bit of, passionate and ownership in their answers, and they come across as flat and disinterested, the jury's like, wait a second, what, why? Like it doesn't make sense to them. So again, another credibility problem.
Yeah, and like I said, not one that we deal with as much, but I will move to our last and final one that we do deal with more often than the apathetic witnesses. That's the witness who has been deposed before, who maybe hasn't been deposed 20 times, but has been deposed one or two times, and so basically says to you, "I know the game. I know that opposing counsel is trying to trick me on every question." And then they start overthinking questions. They start trying to figure out where the attorney is going, or just they think they're too smart for their own good. You want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, that's a yeah, they come with this false sense of security. And we see this, I think this is most dangerous when um, they've been deposed before and the plaintiff attorney wasn't really good. And now they're going up, right? So they have a cognitive schema of, oh, I've been down this road, everything's good. It's like, well, not with this attorney, you haven't, right? So you have to convince them. And a lot of this is some tough love. So when you're doing your mock questioning, I think it's important to show them very early on, we ain't in Kansas anymore. Uh, okay, this is not easy street. And the fact that the last two depositions you had were all open-ended questions. The attorney was very professional and nice. And this also happens, maybe they were deposed, kind of just like for example, you get so we work with a lot of doctors and physicians, right? Physicians oftentimes get deposed because they were a treating physician. They're not a defendant. And so like, yeah, I've been deposed a bunch of times, and they were just asked questions about the medical record, their care, they weren't being attacked at all. And so there's a incongruence versus their previous experience versus this experience. And then the other thing that you and I work with is a lot of correctional, police officers. Well, they testify all the time in a police type of way in a criminal case, right? But then if it's a civil deposition, it's completely different, right? They're a target. And so getting their head around these issues is very important, and to ensure that they understand whatever they in from the past, you need to forget, like beyond the setup of the room, everything else is going to be different, and to address that immediately in the prep sessions.
Yeah, and I think in those situations too, it's depending on how the witness comes in. Like I said, some witnesses will think they know the game. Other ones have come in who have been deposed before are open to the process. So you handle a little bit
Yeah.
different. So not all witnesses who've been deposed before are going to be like this. But the ones that come in knowing the game and don't really want to listen to you, I mean, don't I love just having them cough up the case in five mock cross-examination questions and then have them not even
Yeah.
realize that they did it right. They're like, well, I thought you knew the game. I thought you were skilled. I didn't think I could trick you because you know the answers to everything, but yet I just got you to cough up the case in five questions.
And then they go, oh, okay, now I get it, right?
Yeah.
And then you have their attention. So you do have to get their attention so they understand it's a very different ball game with this particular deposition, and that typically wakes them up.
Yep. All right. It's been a good podcast, Bill. I mean, I think this is something we haven't talked about as much, and we talk about it, in papers and speeches a little bit, but we haven't really, I don't think, gone into in depth in a podcast before. So, take home messages. You got a bunch of different types of witness types. You got to figure out which one it is, but then you got to spend the time that it takes to help them overcome whatever that one is and how they fall into it.
And again, they're oftentimes, this is more of a, and again, you're the social psychologist. There's a lot of a social desirability bias here, where a witness comes in, they're going to hide their weaknesses. They're going to hide, a lot of them hide. So you may have the angry witness that's hiding it because they don't want to rock the boat, right? They don't want to be perceived a certain way, and they hide it. Well, if you don't ask and dig deeper, then you're never going to know. And then that can blow up on you in the deposition. So keep in mind, what you see is not always what you get, which is why witness assessment is so critical to success in their performance.
Yep, great point. We're going to end on that. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast. Go to courtroomsciences.com. Feel free to reach out to me or Bill via email. Always happy to hear from you. If you got any questions about cases that are coming up or just questions in general and want to get some of our papers that we've written, feel free to reach out to us and join us for another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences.